Hi there, I'm doing a very quick photo shoot for some LinkedIn headshots. Now it's a really simple setup with a reflector and an off-camera flash, and in the middle I've got two stars on the ground. That's where I want people to put their feet, and then on the umbrella I've got the flash up there, and then I have a star just there. So what I do is I get people to stand on the spot with their toes, pointing their chin towards the star, and then look at me with their eyes. And that gives you a really nice little line on their chin, makes them sort of stand up nice and straight, and you get a really good result. And I believe I have my next person to take a photo of. Hi!
Part of my role when I started working at ANZ Bank in New Zealand in corporate communications was to do internal photography. So as I developed my corporate photography skills working on different projects, I wanted to ensure I could get good quality results with basic equipment. So that means I could train other staff members at ANZ to get good quality results as well without really expensive equipment. So in this case, all I was using was a Canon 600D with the kit lens, which was a 18-35, and a 430EX2 flash, which worked perfectly fine. Using this gear for probably at least a year and a half, made me a significantly better photographer than when I had access to a Canon 5D and when I owned my own Canon 7D and L-series lenses. With a basic kit, you're forced to be much more accurate and efficient. I found the off-camera flash performance on the 600D was actually superior to the 7D. It was more reliable and easier to set up. Also, the crop sensor of the 600D gives you a really good telephoto effect. So for this first shot of the series, which was at 71 millimeter on the lens, that's the equivalent of about 100 millimeter, which is ideal for a portrait lens for this kind of headshot. The exposure for this was 1/60th of a second at f5, so we get some okay depth of field because the office background is quite a far distance away. I usually experimented with a few settings for the off-camera flash and also with the ISO and the exposure on the camera body to get a good result and balanced lighting. I could never get the results exactly perfect based on some magic formula. You just have to do the best at the time and see what you come up with. For this example, I set the camera up on a tripod and used the camera timer or the self-timer to experiment on myself until I got the good exposure and I was happy with what it looked like before people started turning up for their photos. I had everyone scheduled for about 5 to 10 minutes apart when they were turning up, and I didn't really want anyone waiting around, and I certainly didn't want like a queue of 20 people watching me while I was taking photos. That was going to freak me out a little bit. So for most people, I took 2 or 3 shots, so I had options later, but the more shots you take, the more time you spend in Photoshop or Lightroom sorting things out. So at the time, I'd delete any bad shots on the camera before moving on to the next person. So you have less images to sort through when you do that. You want to try and have the best possible lighting setup from the start and fix as little in post later on. You just want a little slight exposure and color balance to tweak to get a pleasing result. Play the image back on your LCD, zoom in to check the focus, and if it looks like it's a pleasing or appealing expression at a glance, then you've got a good shot and you can release that person and move on to the next one. You need to shoot fast and not waste people's time. If someone is really unhappy with their shot, later on you can come back and you can maybe do a different setup or just do a one-on-one session for them. People are always going to be critical of how they look on camera, so it's really up to you just to get as much done quickly and then let people worry about their individual reaction to your shot. You're never going to get it perfect, but your skills will improve over time. You can tell jokes if you want to get people to loosen up and be relaxed, but I'd usually tell people to just take a big breath and let it out and then just smile. And by the second or third time they do it, it looks natural. And you want to get the smile and capture the shot during the process of them smiling, not when they're holding or forcing a smile. Not everyone is photogenic, so you need to try a few options and different angles to sort of get them to rotate maybe the opposite side. I prefer, honestly, to have people facing towards the left of the frame. We read from left to right, and if their head is pointing to the left side of the frame, I feel like you linger longer on their face and you come to a natural pause when you're looking at them. Whereas when the person's head is facing towards the right of the frame, I think you tend to pass over their photo with your eye and keep reading through the page. So I prefer to have people looking towards the left side of frame on LinkedIn. Ironically, my shot on LinkedIn right now is facing the other way. I opened each raw image in Photoshop and made basic adjustments and then did a batch output of the whole folder as JPEG files using the Actions function in Photoshop. At the time, I don't think I had access to Lightroom, but even then I wanted to keep this example and process as simple as possible. Once I had the portrait JPEGs at high res, I did any cropping as required, and then I did another batch process of screen resolution JPEG images, and then square images, which I think were probably 400 pixels square, which people could use for their social media. At the time when I took these shots, LinkedIn and Twitter were being opened up at the bank, and staff were getting basically updating their profiles or starting profiles from scratch. So I'd often get asked to do headshots for people, and this was the first time I was being asked to do a batch of 30 people at the same time. So I needed to make sure the process was quick and easy, because more than likely people were going to come and ask me for more of them in future. And it was a pretty cool way to meet lots of different people across different areas of the bank. At the time, the building I was in New Zealand, in Auckland, had probably about 2,500 people at ANZ in the same building. So I was expecting that a few more people were going to ask me to help them. I hope you find this setup helpful. You'll notice that obviously I had the stars on the ground. They just happened to be star-shaped post-it notes, but that's why they were stars. But I thought it was a little bit interesting. So I put the stars on the floor for their feet, and then I put the little star where I wanted them to point their chin and then have them looking at me. I felt that really gave a nice angle, and it actually, as you can see from the photos, gives a pretty consistent look and a consistent result. When I was working in advertising and design before I joined ANZ, I think I used to overcook things a lot and try and get really creative and get really fussy. This is really time consuming, and when I started shooting several times a day, every day, for corporate communications work, I learned a lot about how to shoot quickly and efficiently with minimal gear for maximum results. There's simply not enough time when you work for a corporation to muck around and get really sort of creative. For most purposes, your images will just be displayed on a computer screen, and it's easy to get carried away with really expensive cameras with amazing sensors and massive lenses. And if you're just still shopping for gear now while you're looking at this video, my advice for anyone at any budget is to basically get a lens which is the same price as a camera body. So then you have a balanced, reliable image system, and you can just get going and get on with it and use it. A second-hand camera body for $500 and a second-hand lens for about $500 is still a really good place to start. So you get that combination of image system and lens together, and then as your budget goes up over time and as your skills increase over time, you can really justify spending the extra money. But don't just wait around looking on the internet at these $4,000 cameras thinking it's going to turn you into a better photographer. The only thing that turns you into a better photographer is practice, and you should be doing it every day with whatever you can afford. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'm happy to answer them and give you some feedback. Thanks for watching.